Discover the incredible moment when she quietly cursed him. His stunning response transformed Eve. Eve stood in the kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator punctuating the silence as she packed her lunch for yet another day of teaching. It was an ordinary Tuesday, or so it seemed. She glanced at Mark, her husband, in the living room, where he was bent over his laptop, the glow illuminating his focused expression. The air was thick with his ambition, a palpable force that eclipsed her own fading identity. Each day she felt more like an accessory to his success than an individual with passions and dreams, her paintbrushes gathering dust, her easel a territory she no longer claimed. At the last neighborhood dinner party, she had listened intently as Mark regaled their friends with tales of his latest high-stakes case. Her heart sank as she overheard him brush off her art school aspirations, dismissing them with a casual wave of the hand, his voice dripping with a condescension that felt like a slap. "Eve's painting is just a hobby," he had said, laughter trickling through the air. It struck deep, igniting a lingering fury that she didn't know how to voice. She silently cursed him then, her heart heavy with betrayal. The anger simmered, transforming into a storm as she drove home that night. With each flicker of the headlights illuminating the road ahead, a flicker ignited within Eve. The tantalizing thought of reclaiming her identity buzzed in her mind, pushing her toward the canvas that waited, yearning for her touch. She arrived home, breathless with excitement, but clutched by a conflicting dread. How could she pursue her art, her passion, when Mount Debt loomed ominously after Mark's recent loss in a high-stakes case? Financial turmoil blanketed their household, twisting what should have been a liberating journey into a daunting hurdle. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Every brushstroke became a therapy session, yet the tension between her burgeoning success and the dutiful wife she was expected to be only intensified. Mark's disappointment at her art shows cast a shadow over her victories, and the suffocating weight of responsibility squeezed her heart tight. Each time they argued about priorities, the chasm widened, her ambition clashing with his need for stability. She wanted to be heard, to see him take pride in her work, but Mark's struggle with inadequacy kept him from acknowledging her efforts. Late one night, exhausted yet restless, she found herself painting furiously, the canvas absorbing her anguish. The hours slipped away as she poured her emotions into her artwork. But still, she felt the tug of expectation pulling her back to him, to their life together. The night before her first gallery opening, a wave of doubt washed over her. Would Mark stand beside her as she birthed this new version of herself? Would he finally see her, really see her? The question spun wildly in her mind, but just as she was about to crack under the pressure, the doorbell rang, a moment steeped in possibility, hanging in the air, as the noise from outside threatened to overwhelm her resolve. Eve stood poised on the precipice of transformation, teetering between hope and despair, her future hanging in uncertainty as Mark's footsteps echoed toward her. Would tonight lead to a newfound respect, or would it push them further apart? As the door swung open, the world beyond came crashing in, pulling their attention away, leaving a fragile tension hanging like a cloud. Whatever lay ahead could change everything. But for now, she remained suspended in the storm of her own making. Eve inhaled sharply as the door swung open, revealing their neighbor, a bubbly artist named Clara, who had taken a keen interest in Eve's journey. Clara had no idea the storm brewing beneath the surface, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm as she stepped inside, a bottle of wine cradled in one arm and a bouquet of freshly cut flowers in the other. "What's the occasion?" Clara asked, her voice as lively as her presence. "Just a little gallery opening," Eve managed to say, masking the quiver in her voice with a smile. "Just a little?" Clara laughed, her eyes darting to the paintings propped against the walls, each one a canvas of Eve's internal struggles and victories. "These are amazing. I can't believe I've never seen these before. You should be so proud." A flicker of pride ignited within Eve, momentarily pushing aside the tight grip of doubt. Clara's compliments were a balm, yet they couldn't drown out the dissonance thudding in her chest. She was about to showcase her work to the world, but would Mark's reaction be one of support or critique? "Let me help you get ready." Clara's buoyancy pulled Eve momentarily out of her self-loathing, redirecting her focus. They began arranging the space to create a warm atmosphere, yet each brush of Clara's hand against the canvas felt like a reminder of all that was at stake. Eve caught a glimpse of herself in the reflecting surface of the kitchen window. The woman staring back appeared almost foreign, a stranger held captive by the weight of her marriage and her unfulfilled hunger for authenticity. She had traded her truth for compromise, relinquishing dreams for domesticity, a choice that clouded her judgment. As they prepared, the tension in the air shifted palpably. Mark emerged, a reluctant shadow in the doorway, and Eve felt her chest tighten. He looked at Clara, a softening in his eyes, then turned his gaze toward Eve, his expression inscrutable. The warmth he typically radiated felt like a distant memory, replaced by the cautious energy of a man taken aback by her public aspirations. "Hey," he greeted, tentative. "I didn't know you were doing this now." "Yeah, well, it's happening," Eve replied, a defiant spark flaring as the words tumbled out. "I'm ready." Mark's eyes narrowed slightly, confusion mingling with doubt. Ready for what? To fail? The accusation hung heavily, like a lead weight threatening to sink her ambition. Eve's heart raced. The night was bearing down on her, the stakes already impossibly high. Why did he always revert to that side of himself? Why could he not see the excitement and joy this brought her? Grappling with the urge to deflate in his presence, she took a breath, steadied herself. "I won't fail. I have to do this, Mark. For me." The words were bold and raw, an assertion of her identity that she hadn't allowed herself to claim before. Mark scoffed, the defeat laced in his voice, shaking her core. "Is this really something you want?" His voice was thick with disdain, pushing her further into a corner of despair. "It's not just about what I want, it's about who I am." Eve fired back, a simmering anger rising to the surface. "And you don't get to judge that." The tension spiraled, her fury matching the turmoil in Mark's eyes. Clara quietly observed, the tension of their confrontation electric in the air. Eve's determination clashed against Mark's resistance, and in that moment, she realized this was no longer just about art. It was a battle for herself, her future, and all the dreams she had hidden away. What he didn't know about himself, she thought, a spark of revelation igniting within her. As the minutes crawled by and the doorbell rang again, more guests arriving, Eve felt a sense of urgency washing over her. She needed to carve out space for her truth amidst the chaos. Mark's doubt gnawed at her, but now it felt like fuel. The night awaited, carrying with it the potential to shatter their fragile illusions or forge a new understanding. She needed to come alive in this moment, to confront not just Mark, but the limitations she had allowed to bind her down. Eve stood before the canvas, arms crossed, her heart pounding in anticipation. Would tonight be the pivotal moment where she claimed her space alongside Mark, or would it drive them further apart? Whatever lay ahead loomed with an electrifying promise. A reckoning was on the horizon. With each passing second, she felt the ground shift beneath her. The time had come to face not just Mark, but the latent artist she had finally dared to confront, marking the beginning of a new chapter, her fate teetering on the cusp of transformation. Would this be the night she broke free? A soft murmur of conversations enveloped Eve as the first guests trickled in, their chatter a kaleidoscope of voices that filled the previously silent room. Clara flitted between companions, her infectious excitement lighting up the dim corners of Eve's anxiety. The canvases, once mere reflections of Eve's soul, stood proudly on display, bearing witness to years of her stifled desires. Still, Eve felt a gravitational pull towards Mark, his presence a mix of swirling uncertainty and palpable distance. With a cocktail in hand, he was at the periphery of the gathering, exchanging pleasantries, yet the warmth of their past seemed to slip further and further away. Each laugh he shared with others echoed a sharp contrast to the critical judgment she felt loomed over her head. "Shouldn't you be out there mingling?" Clara's voice pierced through her reverie. "You've worked so hard for this." Eve's throat tightened. "What if he's right?" she murmured, barely audible. "What if this really is?" "Stop," Clara interjected, her tone firm. "This is your moment, Eve. You can't let his doubts drown out your voice. You've poured your heart into these pieces. Show him who you are." Nodding, Eve felt a spark ignite within her, a determination that had simmered for too long. She took a deep breath, wiped her clammy palms on her jeans, and stepped forward, letting the energy in the room envelop her. As she moved through the guests, she engaged in conversations, explaining the inspiration behind each painting. Slowly, snippets of compliments began to seep into her consciousness, wrapping around her like a warm embrace. Each enthusiastic word from the crowd castrated Mark's skeptically whispered doubts into silence. Amidst sharing laughter about color choices and techniques, Eve noticed Mark watching her. His hardened expression transformed as he leaned against the wall, the shadow of skepticism softening into something akin to surprise. There was a flicker of something, a glimmer of pride? "I did it," she thought, feeling fueled by the encouragement rather than stifled by fear. The urge to confront him grew, but a wave of self-assurance surged within her as she once again locked eyes with him. "Eve," he finally called, his voice rising above the low hum of background chatter. "Can we talk?" Nothing about his tone promised an easy discussion, but she nodded, allowing herself to be led away from the crowd to a quieter corner of the gallery. Under the subtler lighting, the anger that had fueled their previous argument began to brew anew. He had always wielded criticism like a sword, detaching it from his own insecurities, the very thing that had stirred discomfort inside of her. "You really think this is who you are?" he asked, skepticism lacing his words. Her breath hitched. "What a bizarre question to ask," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You never seemed interested in who I wanted to become, only in who you wanted me to be." "Eve, that's not fair," he countered, frustration bubbling beneath the surface. "I care about you. Do you? Or do you only care about the version of me that fits neatly into your world?" Each word felt charged with a reality she had hidden for far too long. His expression shifted, the realization of her truth weighing heavily between them. "That's not what I want," he said slowly, haltingly, as if grappling with the cracks forming in his worldview. "Then help me. Help me be better. But please, stop pushing against what I want to achieve," she urged, her voice softer now, yet tinged with urgency. "I am not asking for permission, but I need support." He searched her face, and in that moment, a flicker of understanding passed between them. What cascaded next felt transformative, a shift not just for her, but for him. "Okay," he breathed, the simple word encapsulating years of confusion. Eve's mind swirled. Could this truly be the turning point? She felt a weight lift, yet an innovative excitement bubbled underneath. Her paintings were not just brushstrokes on canvases. They were the lens through which she was redefining herself, and Mark's budding acceptance could either bolster her or merely serve as superficial comfort. As she glanced back at the gathering, she realized the night had evolved into something profound. It was no longer just about the art. It was about defining paths. She was not merely reclaiming her identity. She was reshaping the very landscape of their shared life. But in the midst of this emergence, dread lodged in her gut. Would he falter under the pressure of truly understanding her, or could they navigate this transformation together? While the discussion continued, a battle raged within her. She had let him in, but vulnerability demanded a price. Could he really meet her halfway? The moment shifted again as she felt drawn back to the crowd, a reminder of the existence she yearned to embrace. With one foot stepping towards the future, she pondered if she'd find the courage to leap entirely. Determined, Eve turned back to Mark, preparing to challenge the new, fragile bridge they had built. Would it hold, or would it break? How could she confront the fears that lurked beneath the surface still? And, in doing so, would she unearth an even deeper calling within herself? Eve stood in the intimate glow of the room, a sense of anticipation tangling with the remnants of her earlier frustrations. As she faced Mark, the atmosphere between them vibrated with unspoken words. She could feel the eagerness of the crowd behind her, yet all she could focus on was this newly forged connection. "Tell me what it is you want," she challenged, her voice softer but laced with a steely edge, demanding clarity. Mark hesitated, his brow furrowing as he wrestled with the implications of her question. "I want you to know that I admire your work. It's just different." "I'm trying to understand that," he admitted, almost as if he were revealing a part of himself he hadn't shared before. His words hung in the air, ripe with opportunity. Drawing in a deep breath, she pushed back against her instinct to deflect. "Art is meant to be different, Mark. If I'm going to be true to myself, I can't fit into a box." His face paled slightly, but she sensed his understanding was growing. "You're right," he conceded, and the sincerity behind those two simple words startled her. "I've always cared so much about what I thought was best for you, but maybe I've lost sight of what you want." The damage he had inflicted wasn't easy to dismiss, yet here they were, stepping into the light of vulnerability together. "What makes you think you know what's best?" she retorted. "By imposing your visions, what you think I should strive for, you drown out my voice." Mark swallowed hard, anger and regret mixing in his expression. "Maybe I don't trust myself to really get it," he murmured, his gaze darting away. "It's easier to protect you than to let you take risks." The admission struck her deep, but she was a step ahead of resignation. "But it's my life to risk. I need to express the chaos inside me, not contain it. Feeling boxed in won't help me grow. It will only stifle me." A flicker of realization ignited something in Mark. His guard slowly dropped, revealing a vulnerability that mirrored her own. "I'm scared," he confessed, leveling his gaze back at her. "Scared of losing you if you blossom without me." Eve felt the weight of his fears echoing within her own. They were at a crossroads, a pivotal moment probing at uncertainties she had never wanted to contemplate. "Then help me instead of holding me back." The depth of her plea resonated with the strength of fulfillment she craved. For a fleeting moment, the tension between them softened. A shared understanding began wordlessly weaving through their conversation. She could at last see the fragility of his defenses. They mirrored her own. "Maybe we both need to trust each other more." His hesitation faltered, replaced by a newfound resolve. "And what if I fail to meet your expectations?" "Then let's learn from it," Eve ventured, an inkling of excitement coursing through her. "Your fears don't negate my desires. Embracing my passion won't diminish what we have. It could strengthen what we are capable of creating together." Mark's expression hardened again, not from anger but from introspection, grappling with choices laid bare before him. Uncertainty glimmered in his eyes, but there was also the faintest hint of anticipation. She recognized the stakes. Failure to navigate this chasm might fracture everything she yearned for, yet walking away now felt insurmountable. "I want you to make art that honors your voice," he stated with palpable sincerity, punctuating the night with a gravitas that shifted their entire reality. Eve's heart raced at the potential in his words. Her vision was not yet fully realized, but he was beginning to grasp what it meant for her. What would it take to move beyond challenges into this new space of collaboration? A sense of possibility enveloped them both. Eve glanced back at the gathering, where conversations hummed with joy, yet now she felt an urgency pressing in. This was not merely about the art, it was about the artistry of their lives. "Let's confront our fears together," she whispered, her heart racing as she contemplated the journey ahead. But would that journey safely lead them to newfound territories, or would the risk of discovery tear them apart? With determination surging within her, she took Mark's hand, a renewed sense of hope sparking between their fingers. The path forward was shrouded in uncertainty, yet one question lingered with palpable gravity. Could they find courage together, or would this endeavor only reveal deeper divides? The air in the room felt electric as Eve tightened her grip on Mark's hand. A part of her thrummed with excitement, while another part gnawed at her anxieties. Their shared moment teetered between support and vulnerability, challenging her to redefine the boundaries of her art and relationship. She needed to stay present, both for herself and for him. The fears that danced in the back of her mind whispered accusations that she might expose herself too much, or worse, lose herself entirely. As they stared into each other's eyes, Eve took a mental step back. How could she reshape her life and career while walking this fragile line with Mark? He wasn't just an admirer, he had become a crucial component of her emotional landscape. Yet the journey ahead promised a potential unraveling. They were both artists in their own right, but the paths they traveled now felt inseparable. "What does it mean for you to trust my voice?" she asked, her voice steady yet probing. She needed to explore this new terrain thoroughly, not just for him but for her growth. Mark blinked, processing her inquiry. "I suppose it means letting go of what I thought art was supposed to be," he finally replied. "It's allowing you to express the chaos, even if it sometimes scares me." "Exactly," Eve said, the thread of excitement unwinding further. "What if that chaos becomes my greatest strength? What if it allows us to create something that reflects both of us, instead of just what you think I should be?" Mark's brow furrowed in contemplation. In this moment, Eve saw him wrestling with a haunting dilemma, the fear of the unknown against the call for innovation and growth. For the first time, she sensed a shift in him, a willingness to acknowledge the complexity of their relationship. Then, something deeper flashed across his expression, a recognition that they were veering away from a rehearsed discourse and venturing into genuine dialogue. And what if this pushes you beyond what you're comfortable with? He questioned. I need to breathe in that discomfort, she asserted, her voice firm yet soft, so I can exhale something authentic. If I keep sacrificing who I am for the sake of security, who will I become? The truth of her statement reverberated between them. She understood the stakes. They both teetered on the precipice of change, where self-discovery could either bloom into brilliance or dissolve into confusion. The pivotal interplay between fear and creativity had to be navigated carefully. Mark surveyed her with such intensity that she felt both naked and liberated. Let's take this step together, he said, the walls of his apprehension seeming to crack. What if I help guide you while respecting your journey? Concrete realization struck Eve. This was not merely about collaboration, it was about coexisting as artists. Yes, and I will encourage you to unleash your own uncertainties. We can inspire each other, not suffocate, she replied, excitement building within her as she envisioned their collective potential. The deeper they delved into this discussion, the more Eve recognized the tangled web of her ambitions and anxieties. Could they really meld their individual artistic visions without losing themselves in the process? Her stomach tightened at the thought, yet she knew she needed to press forward. I want to create a project that embodies both our strengths, the chaos and the order, she proposed, her heart racing with the thrill of possibility. Something that doesn't shy away from the messiness of being alive. Absorbing that chaos sounds exhilarating, he agreed, his voice filled with newfound enthusiasm. But we'll have to navigate it lovingly. There will be moments we falter. Good. With every falter we learn something vital, Eve stated, her fervor solidifying. Embracing risk leads to discovery. The seriousness of her words belied the joy coursing through her. She could feel the pulse of growth within her grasp. Yet beneath her exhilaration loomed a nagging doubt. Would revealing their vulnerabilities not only lead to artistic breakthroughs, but also fracture their personal connection? The tension hung palpably as she weighed both prospects. As if sensing her turmoil, Mark stepped closer, wrapping his free arm around her waist. Whatever challenges come, we face them head-on. His commitment felt both intimidating and invigorating. Just as Eve opened her mouth to reply, laughter erupted from the crowd, a warm distraction that pulled her momentarily from introspection. Could she truly balance the external demands of art and the emotional complexities brewing between them? The crowd's excitement brushed against the backdrop of their private exchange. Their worlds met at this intersection of vulnerability and potential, yet doubts flickered just below the surface, waiting for their moment. And as she glanced back at the gathering, her mind spun with the multitude of paths she could take. With Mark's steady warmth beside her, the stakes felt monumental, but the insistence of uncertainty loomed larger than ever. How would her journey toward authenticity ripple through the tapestry of their relationship? In that charged silence, Eve braced herself for the challenges looming ahead, knowing that each choice stripped away layers, revealing ever more intricacies. What awaited them in this partnership clashed vividly against everything she thought she knew. Feeling the weight of their intertwined fates, she grappled with a single thought. Was she ready to confront the core of her being, knowing both art and love held unpredictable consequences? Eve felt her heart race as the warmth of Mark's touch lingered around her waist. An unexpected wave of clarity washed over her, making her acutely aware of the heightening stakes in both her art and their evolving relationship. The laughter from the crowd became a distant echo, overpowering her internal dialogue with the promise of new beginnings, yet tainted with the weight of uncertainty. What comes next? She mouthed to herself, contemplating the precise calibration of her forthcoming project. Could this be the watershed moment that defined not only her artistic trajectory, but also the foundation of her personal connection with Mark? She needed to harness her anxiety as a tool rather than a barrier. Hey, Mark prompted, pulling her back from the depths of contemplation. You okay? Refocusing, she nodded. Yeah, I want this so much, but I can feel the pressure of it all already. The word pressure echoed in her mind, reverberating off the walls of her dreams and aspirations. Was striving for authenticity an endeavor that would breed liberation or chains? It's natural, Mark reassured her, his fingers gently squeezing her waist. We're delving into unknown territory together. Just remember that turmoil is part of the creation process. Turmoil. The word resonated within her. It was raw and unsettling, yet it also suggested growth, a necessary roughness that could yield profound art. She scrutinized Mark's expression, searching for any sign of doubt, but found only a steadiness that calmed her chaos. His belief in their collective potential ignited an inner confidence long stifled by self-doubt. "Let's commit to being open about how we feel during this process," she proposed, her brain racing with the implications of such vulnerability. "It has to be more than just creating something beautiful. It has to challenge both of us." Mark's brow furrowed slightly, a flicker of apprehension darting across his face. "Challenge can be good, but it can also lead to tension." "Exactly," she agreed, her excitement punctuated with seriousness. "But that tension is where we find truth. If we're willing to confront what scares us, we can create something that's raw and real. I refuse to let fear dictate my art anymore." Eve felt emboldened, but beneath her burgeoning confidence lurked shadows of doubt. What if this genuine collaboration revealed deeper fissures in their relationship? What if the very act of baring their souls through art strained their emotional connection? "My instincts say we'll be all right if we are both fully committed," Mark said, his tone resonating with resolve. Yet she couldn't ignore the nagging impulse to retreat. Her past had taught her to shield her deepest vulnerabilities, and although her growth was palpable, she hovered at the brink of the unknown. "I know we want to support each other, but if we challenge each other too much—" "Too much?" he interrupted, uncertainty coloring his voice. "What is too much? Isn't that subjective?" His probing drew out more layers of her hesitance. "I guess a part of me worries that we'll become consumed by our own ideas. What if I lose sight of myself in the pursuit of this project?" Mark moved closer, his eyes locked onto hers. "Then let's promise to pull each other back before we lose ourselves. We can't let the creation overshadow who we are." The sincerity of his words pierced through her armor. She was not just carving out new pathways as an artist, she was also navigating the intricate dance of a burgeoning partnership. "Deal," she agreed softly, feeling the tension crackle between them. But as they hung onto that handshake of promise, a realization struck her. Would she see this as liberation or a potential pitfall? The crowd resumed their laughter and conversation, echoing in the background as Eve's thoughts twisted and turned. There was magic and peril in the alchemy of collaboration, and with every notion of trust, the boundary between art and love blurred even further. She breathed deeply, gripping Mark's hand as they began to part toward the canvas of their dreams. "Let's meet tomorrow to gather our ideas," he suggested, a hint of eagerness evident in his tone. "Yes, let's," she affirmed, yet her mind buzzed with lingering questions. What truths would rise to the surface when they faced their demons together? In the twilight of uncertainty, Eve felt the tide of change swelling around her. Above the echoes of laughter, she summoned her silent fears, fortified by a newfound commitment to both the project and their relationship. A part of her still hesitated, worried about the depths they were diving into, but the potential for unfolding magic was irresistible. And so, with every step forward, the line between their artistic exploration and personal entanglement blurred, a thrilling precipice on which she stood. But what if, in the pursuit of raw truth, we lose more than we gain? Eve awakened the next morning with an unsettling sense of anticipation. The sunlight streaming through the window felt both energizing and oppressive, illuminating the doubts she had tried to suppress the night before. Today was the day they would begin sculpting their creative vision, yet the thought of confronting her vulnerabilities alongside Mark sent ripples of anxiety through her stomach. As she prepared, her mind raced back to their conversation. Mark's commitment to maintaining their individuality amidst their shared creation weighed heavily on her thoughts. She couldn't shake off the notion that intimacy and collaboration often brought underlying insecurities to the surface. Would their art reflect their personal struggles, or weave a tapestry of their connection? Could they share their truths without losing sight of themselves? By the time she arrived at the studio, her pulse quickened. The stark white walls welcomed her, a blank canvas mirroring her mind. Mark was already there, arranging tools, his brow furrowed in concentration. The sight of him ignited a flicker of confidence within her, yet this was accompanied by a gnawing fear. "Hey you," he greeted, looking up and smiling. "Ready to dive in?" "Yeah," she replied, her voice coming out steadier than she felt. "I think so." The two soon began discussing concepts, brainstorming ideas about their collaborative project. Mark suggested themes of love entwined with fear, while Eve pushed to explore raw truths hidden beneath layers of emotion. As they spoke, she found herself opening up, allowing her previously guarded thoughts to spill onto the table. It was exhilarating, yet terrifying, like peering over the edge of a cliff into the unknown depths below. Yet as they sketched and discussed, Eve couldn't shake the feeling of impending tension. What if their artistic exploration revealed rifts in their connection? She had already promised Mark that they would both hold each other accountable, but was that enough? "Eve, what do you think?" Mark's voice broke her trance. She noticed the expectant look on his face. His eyes filled with excitement, but suddenly a moment of panic clamped around her heart. She hesitated, unable to respond effectively. "Eve?" Mark's tone shifted to concern, pulling her from the weeds of anxiety. "I'm sorry," she finally managed, the words spilling out. I'm scared about where this is all heading. What if we end up creating something that tears us apart instead of bringing us together?" Mark regarded her with a thoughtful expression, and for a split second, she feared he would retreat behind the veil of uncertainty she was trying to push through. Instead, he stepped closer, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Eve, art is supposed to challenge us. The fear we feel should motivate us, not inhibit us. I'm scared too, but we can't allow that fear to overtake our creativity." His words rang with sincerity, yet doubt still clung to Eve like a second skin. "Then what if we take a different approach?" she proposed, her mind shifting gears. "What if we don't limit our exploration to just beauty or raw truths? Let's embrace the chaos." Mark's eyes lit up with intrigue. "Chaos? You mean—" "Yeah. Embrace the imperfections. Let's confront our fears head-on through this process. Struggle with the art itself until we create something that really means something to us." The notion felt thrilling, yet Eve's heart raced at the confrontation it implied. Would they truly be willing to expose themselves so deeply? She delved into the possibility, noting the way it began to excite them both. "I love that," Mark replied, his voice vibrant with purpose. "But are you ready to actually delve into that chaos together?" As she weighed his question, Eve felt the tension build within her. It was one thing to talk about embracing chaos, but another to step into it boldly. "Only if you are," she replied, a new determination edging into her voice. "We'll have to push past our fears, challenge one another." As Mark considered her challenge, Eve sensed a shift within herself, a new solidity emerging from the fog of self-doubt. Was she truly ready to embrace this chaotic pursuit, or was this a veiled path to deeper vulnerability? With determination on his face, Mark nodded, which only intensified the gravity of her decision. Together they might emerge transformed on the other side, but they could also fracture amid the tumult. "Then we have a deal," she said, heart pounding fiercely in her chest. As they outlined the chaotic journey ahead, Eve realized they were embarking on more than just an artistic venture. They were teetering on the brink of discovering fundamental truths about themselves, their relationship, and their art. But as excitement surged, an icy undercurrent of fear whispered through her mind. What if the chaos reveals more than they anticipated? Eve could feel the shifting currents of their collaboration already pulling her deeper into uncharted waters. How far were they both willing to go into these depths? The studio buzzed with an electric energy, but Eve felt herself retreating into her thoughts. Conceiving a plan to harness chaos was one thing, but acting on it felt like attempting to tame a tempest. Mark had ignited something in her, yet the flicker of that initial excitement threatened to extinguish itself beneath swirling doubts. She found herself wandering deeper into a labyrinth of questions about her own capabilities and the risks of exposure. As they worked alongside each other, the sounds of pencil scratching against paper filled the room, punctuated by Mark's occasional murmurs of inspiration. Yet Eve stared listlessly at her blank canvas, anxiety tightening its grip on her chest. In her imagination, the chaos she had proposed morphed into a beast, one that could just as readily devour her aspirations as nourish them. "Eve, could you pass me that charcoal?" Mark's voice cut through her reverie, drawing her attention back to their collaborative space. She obliged, but with each movement she felt heavier, as though the weight of their ambitions was pressing down upon her. What would chaos truly look like in their work? What would it evoke? In order to invite raw emotion, she'd have to unearth her vulnerabilities, an arduous task in and of itself. The idea of revealing any cracks in her facade loomed large, casting a shadow over her enthusiasm. She was on the brink of an internal confrontation, and it felt as if the very essence of who she was lay in the balance. "Thanks, Eve," Mark said, his focus unbroken, but the warmth of his appreciation only served to heighten her tension. She didn't just want to create, she grappled with wanting to be seen as competent and worthy in this partnership. "What do you think about starting with a few rapid sketches that dive into our fears?" There's something cathartic about it. The suggestion startled her. Sketching her fears was an untested idea. It made her skin crawl. Yet it also sparked a flicker of curiosity within. "Are you sure we should put our insecurities on display like that?" she asked, unable to hide the tremor in her voice. "Why not? We're embracing imperfections, right? The more real we are, the stronger our art will resonate," he replied with such conviction. It was a bold proposal that sent her mind racing, but she could feel a rush building, an exhilaration sparked by the audacity of their pursuit. Was she really ready to be seen in all her imperfections? Could she confront those flaws, exposing herself both personally and artistically? Taking a deep breath, Eve steeled herself. "Okay, let's do it." The firm, steady tone of her voice surprised even her. The challenge had presented itself, and with it, an opportunity for her to reclaim the narrative woven into their collaboration. As they grabbed fresh charcoal sticks, the studio transformed into an arena. She set the charcoal to the paper deliberately, skittering the tip across the surface, each mark becoming an embodiment of nagging fears. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy. With every stroke, she felt a residue of power lingering, a realization that while her heart raced with apprehension, there was a burgeoning strength emerging from within. "And what if we curse the chaos?" she said, a sudden burst of courage fueling her voice. "What if we don't just expose our fears, but wrestle with them until we can laugh in their face?" Mark paused mid-stroke, his gaze piercing as he took in her proposal. "You mean, almost mock our own vulnerabilities?" "Exactly, to take back control." His expression shifted from surprise to delight, and the air between them crackled with anticipation. There was a palpable energy in their unspoken understanding. She saw in his eyes the possibility of turning their fears into fuel for creative expression. What began as a heavy expectation morphed into something electric. As their personalities entwined with the chaos, Eve couldn't shake the feeling that they might inadvertently spark a wild transformation, one with the potential to redraw the boundaries of their collaboration. But would such transformation affirm their connection, or would it push them into deeper uncharted territory? An impatient heartbeat echoed within her. Whatever lay ahead, Eve now felt dangerously close to the edge of a radical leap, an adventure that might either culminate in profound enlightenment or plunge her further into uncertainty. Clearly, the moment arrived. Would they wield the chaos as a tool for growth, or allow it to fracture the very foundation of what they were trying to build together? With that thought lingering in the air, Eve could only wonder, what would become of their vision when confronted by the relentless waves of vulnerability? Eve's heart raced as she pressed the charcoal against the paper, her breath hitching with each erratic stroke. The grim shapes formed around her, a swirling mass of jagged lines and dark smudges that reflected not just her fears, but the wild storm brewing inside. She had thought confronting those fears would be terrifying, yet the act of translating them into art provided an unexpected solace, a tangible way to grasp at their essence. Mark, lost in his own chaotic dance with the charcoal, began to echo her movements. The room pulsed with an unspoken challenge. "What you're doing is beautiful," he remarked suddenly, his voice warm yet unnervingly perceptive. "It's like you're freeing those fears rather than letting them bind you." Eve paused, her hand hovering over the thick darkness on the paper. His words stung with sincerity, making her question whether the emotional turmoil she poured into her sketch could ever genuinely be deemed beautiful. Did beauty lie in vulnerability, or was it merely a facade to hide behind? Yet as she released the charcoal again, her initial hesitation morphed into determination. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, the act of creation felt less like a battle and more like a declaration, a defiance against the suffocating grip of self-doubt. They worked side by side, immersed in the chaos of their collaboration. Each sketch began to reflect not just their fears, but the humor in their shortcomings, even a strange delight in their absurdity. Eve was taken aback to notice Mark's sketches had evolved into something resembling playful monsters, each representing a fear that seemed less threatening and more familiar. "Look at this one," he laughed, gesturing to a comical figure with exaggerated features. "I'm pretty sure it's just an angst-ridden octopus." "Perfect!" she burst out, igniting a shared laughter that rang against the studio walls. The lingering tension evaporated, leaving behind a fresh current of creativity. A new idea flickered through her mind as she surveyed their work, half-formed, yet vibrant. What if we turn this into a performance, an exhibition that focuses on the absurdity of our fears? The thought jolted her. Was she really suggesting they expose their vulnerabilities to the world? Just a moment ago, such an idea had seemed impossible. Mark's eyes widened, reflecting both surprise and intrigue. A performance piece? You mean physically embodying our fears? The prospect hung heavy in the air, charged with excitement yet laced with apprehension. Yes, we could create a labyrinth to navigate through, where each section holds our sketches, and we perform our battles against them. It would be cathartic. As the idea took root, so did uncertainty. The thought of performing scratched at her insecurities. What if they failed? What if the audience laughed at, not with them? Yet a stirring emboldened her, nudging her to confront the paralyzing fear of exposure. Seeking validation had consumed her for too long. This was about transformation, about owning their chaos rather than shying away from it. Mark grinned, the playful spark in his eyes igniting a fierce determination in her. I can see them cheering us on as we defy these monsters. Everything about this collaboration was starting to feel larger than both of them individually. They were no longer just artists conjuring sketches. They were rebels against the very things that hindered their creativity. But as excitement coursed through her, the ever-familiar ghost of doubt slithered back. Was she truly equipped to step from behind the canvases, to stand vulnerable in the light? The tension cloaked her, mingling with a burgeoning exhilaration. If they took this leap, they wouldn't just be wrestling with their fears in private. They would invite others into their chaos. That was a terrifying prospect. Eve gazed at the sketches before her, the playful monsters gleefully taunting her from the paper. She realized the potential for a radical transformation, not just for them, but for everyone who ever feared their imperfections. Would they have the courage to face the audience? The uncharted territory loomed. The time had come to face it all head-on. How far could they go? And what ultimately would emerge from the chaos they dared to invite? Eve stood in the studio, her heart racing at the precipice of their radical idea. The sketches had evolved into symbols of their fears, yet they also became the embodiment of their growth. Approaching their chaos as a performance promised a new form of liberation, a tangible expression of vulnerabilities that had once held them captive. With each stroke of charcoal, Eve felt a newfound power coursing through her veins as the duo leaned into uncertainty. They were transforming the core of their artistic process from mere private exploration into something infinitely more significant, a celebration of their struggles. Yet, the thought of showcasing their vulnerabilities to the world grounded her. The fear of judgment loomed heavily over her aspirations. "Let's amplify our anxieties," Mark suggested one day during their rehearsal, sweeping his arms out wide. "Let's envelop the audience in the chaos, allowing them to confront their own fears as they watch us process ours." His enthusiasm was infectious. Eve's laughter mingled with his, and for the first time she felt the fabric of their relationship knit tighter through this adventure. They began to experiment with expressive movements that embodied their fears, sculpting physical manifestations that echoed the monsters they had drawn. The absurdity of the performance unveiled the absurdities of life itself. Their earlier trepidation slowly transformed into determination. As weeks passed, their performance began to take shape, a labyrinth of interactive art pieces, a chaotic space where they danced, battled, and ultimately embraced their monsters. Eve was captivated by the idea that they weren't just artists. They were guides through the messy process of acceptance, a conduit for those who had also buried their fears beneath the surface. In the days leading up to the showcase, an unexpected confidence surged within her. For the first time in a long while, Eve saw the reflections of her ambitions within the lines of the labyrinth she had helped to create. But lingering questions percolated beneath her excitement. Would the audience perceive the authenticity in their chaos? How would they react to the vulnerability laid bare for all to see? On the night of the performance, anticipation swirled in the air as guests arrived. Mark glanced at her, a silent reassurance passing between them. Standing backstage before the large curtain, Eve felt a pulse of fear. But instead of freezing her, it ignited a fire within. If others could find healing through their narrative of chaos and acceptance, then she was ready to unveil herself entirely. As the curtain lifted, the audience sat in a pregnant silence, their gazes hungry for something real. The moment hung suspended before her, as though time stood still. They dove into their performance, embodying the chaos with each explosive movement, leaping over imaginary hurdles, wrestling with spectral fears represented by grand gestures, and intertwining their bodies in an artistic ballet drenched in raw emotion. Halfway through the piece, Eve excelled in the ultimate confrontation with her fear, a moment that emerged from the chaos to transform into catharsis. She stood before her imagined monster and, rather than retreat, invited it to dance with her, letting every part of her body express defiance in the face of anxiety. The audience leaned forward, captivated by the portrayal of vulnerability leading toward acceptance. With each twist and turn of the performance, Eve could feel the connection with the audience deepening. Their quiet engagement transformed into whispers of understanding, nods of recognition. She was no longer alone in her struggle. As their performance reached its crescendo, marking their triumph over fears once thought insurmountable, Eve felt a wave of validation envelop her. The applause that followed rang like a celebration of liberation. She had not only faced her fears, but had also projected those lessons outward, allowing others to embrace their journeys. When Mark pulled her into a vigorous embrace amidst the roaring audience, a rush of triumph washed over her. Their vision had transcended personal achievement. It galvanized something universal. They had successfully navigated their chaos, and in doing so, forged a bond that could withstand future challenges. Weeks later, as they stood in front of the waiting canvas again, a firm foundation had been established. Eve felt solid in her identity, recognized and validated as an artist. They had shared not only their art, but their fears, vulnerabilities, and aspirations, each becoming fuel for growth as an artist and as partners. What had once been a silent struggle was now an articulated victory, empowering both Eve and Mark to pursue dreams without the weight of judgment. As they sketched their next plans, Eve's heart soared with the promise of endless possibilities. Her voice, once buried under the constraints of insecurity, now vibrant and unreserved. She was ready for whatever challenge lay ahead. Together, they had conquered chaos, and in doing so, Eve had finally reclaimed her identity. This was not simply about art. This was about living fully, unabashedly, as they danced between creation and chaos, an exhilarating exploration she had come to love. As the curtains closed on this chapter and the canvas awaited their next masterpiece, she could finally exhale the doubts that had shrouded her heart. She was Eve, the artist unafraid to conjure chaos, and she would continue to embrace every shade of her truth, past, present, and future. Now it's your turn. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Everyone who values personal overcoming stories understands the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.